lot of plant breeders, you know, we breed new varieties, and then we forget, but we need to ask the question of, will these varieties be acceptable, and all this end use quality, that type of thing. So Morgan's research was really important, good stepping stone. More will be needed, and really looking forward to Morgan's talk again. So welcome, Morgan.
Thank you. So thank you. I feel honored to be talking with everyone here. And while I have Jessica Goldberger and Kevin and Mike Whiteman and Moses all in the same room, I just want to say thank you so much for all the help and support you gave me during my master's research. So I love food and culture, and I was thinking about this when Twinkies went out off the shelves. When I was little, my dad would take me and my brother once a month down to the corner market, and we could choose whatever we wanted, and I always chose a package of Twinkies. And for those of you who don't know what a Twinkie is, it's really bad for you. And an Orange Crush soda. And probably for 20 years I didn't have a Twinkie, but when Hostess went out of business and there were no more Twinkies, I felt this pang of sadness, a real sadness because of that nostalgia. I link that with childhood memories of my father and these really great memories. So food and culture is so intertwined. People love food, and they feel a real closeness to their food. So I was very lucky to study exactly what I wanted to study for my master's degree. So my topic is assessing the potential adoption of quinoa for consumption in central Malawi. And Moses did a beautiful job of setting up the geography and quinoa and maize. So there are some slides that I'm going to just quickly skip over, so I'm not repeating myself. So the significance of maize in Malawi. So Malawians are the largest consumer per capita of maize in the world. I found this really fascinating. Maize occupies 90% of cultivated land. And this phrase, and forgive my Chichewa, Moses, but Chimango Ndi Moyo means maize is our life. And I read this quite often, and I heard this quite often during my interviews. Maize is also highly sensitive to the deprivation of sunlight, water, and nitrogen, and it also rots easily in tropical storage conditions. So there's some problems there. And there was a big drought in Malawi in 2005, which resulted in a 30% drop in maize harvest. So there's a real issue with here. Some of the challenges that Malawi faces, soil degradation, vulnerability to climate change and shifting rainfall patterns, drought, and poor nutrition, and that's what I'll be focusing on a bit for this talk. Deficiencies in iron, iodine, vitamin A, protein, and 39% of children under 5 are underweight, and Moses also had some great pictures there illustrating this topic. So why quinoa? This has also been covered a bit. Quinoa is a complete protein, gluten-free, there's fiber, a lot of nutrients. Could be very beneficial to this region in Malawi or in Africa. So my two questions I looked at, quinoa has grown successfully, which it seems like it is. In central Malawi, will it be accepted as a new food by the local population? And what are the factors that affect this adoption potential? So that's what I looked at. My research site was the Bunda College of Agriculture, where Moses works, 20 kilometers from Lilongwe, the capital of Malawi. So I was there last summer during a 5-week period in July and August. I was able to visit 4 villages and 4 sub-villages. I interviewed 16 villagers, 5 extension or extension-related agents, and performed 1 focus group at the Total Land Care, or the TLC office in Lilongwe. So my methods, I did qualitative, semi-structured interviews. I performed qualitative analysis. I used grounded theory, which is identifying themes that emerge from the interviews that are being performed. Some snowball sampling, so different interviewees would say you should talk to this person would be great. I used a local interpreter to interpret Chichewa. I used a guided questionnaire. There were some challenges in this process, that including malaria, and there were some student protests at the Bunda College, which, so those 2 things, I had to shift my methods and adapt to my surroundings quite a bit. So this is just an aerial view. Those large orange dots are the main villages. You can see Bunda College up there. And then the yellow dots are the sub-villages. And I walked or rode my bike to these to perform the interviews. So after gathering my information, I needed a framework to be able to compile all the data and to make sense of it, to see, is adoption realistic or is it not in this area? And what I used was Everett M. Rogers. I read this book quite a bit, Diffusion of Innovations. It's a framework to explain how new ideas or technologies, or in this case, quinoa, are spread and adopted in a community, and explains the rate or why cultures adopt new ideas, or individuals, over time. So for this talk, we'll focus on a couple of variables in Rogers' framework. The first one, compatibility, which I'll talk about, and also at the bottom here, the extent of change agents' promotion efforts, or extension agents. I focus on these 2 things because of the time allotted in my study. In the future, I think all of these variables would be very handy in evaluating adoption. So looking over compatibility is the degree to which an innovation is perceived as consistent with existing values, past experiences, and needs of potential adopters. This was really, really valuable and handy in compiling that information I received from all the interviews I did. These are broken down into categories, values and beliefs, previously introduced ideas and needs. And I won't describe them in detail here, but when I get into my findings, they'll make more sense. And then, like I mentioned, change agents, promotion efforts. So people with expertise in the innovation that is being, or the knowledge that is being spread. So there are 4 factors in this success. So including the efforts of the change agent, client orientation, compatibility with the client's needs, and change agent empathy. And I starred these because I really focused on those 2 items. So here are some of the results, or demographics. So I interviewed, for the village interviews, 12 females, 4 males. The average hectare size was 0.4, which is consistent with the national average. The average, as is the household size, 6.2 people, and that's not just parents and children. That's also could be a relative living, an aunt, etc. Average years of schooling was 3.9 years, and 2/3 of the women I interviewed reported no formal education. All 16 farmers or villagers identified farming as their occupation, and that is a subsistence level. There may be a little bit extra left over that could be taken to market, but not much, at least in the people that I interviewed. So this is solely living, this is food for the family. 8 of the villagers claimed to work some odd jobs when possible to earn some extra money for medicines and things like that. All the villagers had maize as their main crop, but they also had soya, sweet potatoes, some cassava, pigeon peas. All villagers had rain-fed plots. 14 out of the 16 did not produce enough maize to last the entire year. And all 16 reported some kind of crop failure in the past years. The biggest reason was drought, but also disease, insects, or not enough fertilizer was a really common answer. So also I interviewed the 5 extension personnel. 4 of those were male and 1 was a female. The female actually worked at the Extension Planning Area Office, which is the government-related office in the area. So I was able to perform a focus group or taste trial at Total Land Care in Lilongwe. So what we did was brought some quinoa, and in the back of Total Land Care during the lunch hour, 2 of the women that were cooking, there's a picture of one, I helped them cook the quinoa over the traditional 3-stone hearth, while the Malawian employees came and at their leisure just came and sat in the back with me, usually in groups of 3 or 4, and just talked about the quinoa. And so the results are at the top there. You can see 4 the men would try quinoa again, 2 the female. Some of the great feedback, though, the conversations that happened was that we cooked the quinoa as you would a rice, and so it was loose on the plate. Well, I didn't think of this, but no one was eating with utensils, and so the enzima, so the flour mixture, the traditional maize flour mixture that Malawians eat, it's sticky, like a sticky porridge, is commonly used to pick up and dip into sauces, and almost used as a utensil. And the quinoa could not provide that. It was just loose. There was no kind of interest, just it didn't make sense to eat it with your hands that way. So that was something interesting that I wasn't even thinking about. So almost everyone suggested that tried the quinoa to prepare this as a flour and mix it with the enzima, and then it would be much better. And also there's a suggestion to put sugar on it, meaning to eat it as a morning porridge and perhaps mixed with the maize porridge that way also. So here are the findings. So going back to that Rogers attribute of compatibility, this is where the values and beliefs, sorry, this is a little verbose, but I wanted to be sure I got all of the phrases in here from the interviewees because they're really fascinating. So values and beliefs, so it's an incompatibility with cultural values can actually block the adoption. So if the item is not compatible with values or culture, it's not going to be adopted. So I thought, ooh, maize is really loved here. So is enzima, and I got this information with these phrases. Chimango cha makola, maize of the ancestors, maize is our life. Enzima is the food of Malawi. We have not eaten if we have not eaten enzima, and Moses talked about that earlier. Enzima, this is my favorite. Enzima is not tasty. It's tradition. It's the thing you found when you were born. So enzima or maize is more than just a staple food dish. It's very deeply tied with social, cultural pride, family. If your village neighbor eats it, your parents ate it. It can be used as a utensil. It's used as a gathering point. So I thought, well, maybe that's a problem when thinking about adopting quinoa. But in my interviews, all 16 villagers, because of the shortages of maize throughout the year due to drought, disease, etc., all the villagers reported a positive response to a new food, any new foods, due to these shortages. So there is an interest there. And especially the comments, I received so many comments about the potential of quinoa to be mixed with enzima. No one said, out of politeness, I'm sure also, but I wouldn't ever eat that. But it was always suggested that perhaps this could be ground into a flour or mixed with enzima for some added nutrition. But that consistency of that enzima is important. Compatibility with previously introduced ideas. So was there something in the past that could have impacted, that could increase or decrease the rate of adoption? And here I was thinking, well, what are the ties with the extension agents that come and visit the villages? Is that positive? Is that negative? Because that could really impact the adoption of quinoa. 12 out of the 16 villagers had ongoing contact with extension agents from Bunda College or the EPA, the government extension. All reported positive interactions with extension agents in the past. The only negative thing was they don't visit here enough. The extension agents on the other side reported slow but positive results when introducing previous new crops like soybeans. Bunda College, especially the nutrition department, had Agnes, as Moses mentioned, and her staff worked on introducing soybeans to different villages, and the EPA extension workers said it has taken time, but with education and constant nutrition talks and nutrition groups and what they call field days, so the extension agents will go out and the villagers will come and everyone will cook together, and there will be an education about soybean, and these are the different ways you can eat it. She said slowly but surely it's coming around as a added nutrient group to the food. One thing I thought would be useful is the EPA officers visit villages 3 to 4 times a week, she noted, in that region. The Bunda College, they're less frequent, but they really focus on main villages per term. So the students will go and focus on 1 or 2 main villages and then switch to other villages. So the result is extension is really prevalent in this area and can be a real positive force in introducing something new. Compatibility in terms of needs. Well, we've talked about the nutrition issues in Malawi. So the need there, I feel, is met. So all the village interviewees showed an interest in the possibility of a new crop. One of the interviewees said, we're very poor. Any new food is helpful in this case. 8 out of the 16 interviewees were already making some adjustments to the diet in July and August. So a hungry season typically starts in December or January. So you can see that was already pretty early in the year to be making some adjustments. And those adjustments might be not eating breakfast, just eating lunch and dinner. And then, as we've talked about before, malnutrition and crop failure. So I believe there is a need. So I think adoption, this is another bonus in terms of adopting quinoa. One of the other variables in Roger's framework was looking at the change agent, or in this case, extension. So extension, they do spend quite a bit of time and effort in education activities in this region. So one of the extension agents said, most people are used to eating enzima, so a new product, they might feel it's not important. But one of the ways we overcome this is by using the nutrition groups and a lot of visits, constant visits. There was also an emphasis on women in the village. Women play an important role in this. Some women were widowed, and so they were the farmers. They're the main person in the household who cooks all the food. There's a really willingness, at least in the interview process, of the women to be interviewed and to learn and to talk. Women seemed very excited to talk about their daily life and food habits and where the future might take them. And also, this is really important too, efforts like making snack foods, different flours are important when making a shift from maize. So really incorporating maize or quinoa into the maize, already present maize system. These are just some more quotes. That there's a high amount of effort and involvement and extension in this region. And I believe this is the last point with change agents. So the more likely a change agent can diagnose the needs of a village, the more likely adoption will occur. And it seemed like the extension agents or change agents were really involved in the community. They lived in the community. And so it seemed like there was a trust and closeness there that would go far in the adoption process. This is something that I found very interesting. One of the comments by one of the interviewees, even if you say it has a lot of nutrients, it doesn't matter. Going back to my Twinkie story, I know it was horrible for me, but there's that allure of the Twinkie of my past. So even if you say it has a lot of nutrients, it doesn't matter. It's what fills you up that matters. So that was a very valuable point, I thought, in this interview process. So my conclusions were using Roger's model to kind of put everything in a nice framework that could tell me if adoption was realistic or not. I found that it was positive. So the results from the interviews confirm in spite of this strong cultural tie to Nsima, that there is an interest and a motivation being food shortages to add a new food into the local diet. The extension personnel in this region is key, as it would in many places. That idea of participatory research between researchers, extension agents, and villagers is really strong and important in the adoption of anything new. Also, the strong involvement with women in nutrition groups, field days, interviews, and as food preparers should be a focus when working with villagers. And here's the community grinder, the Bunda Milling Company. So the feedback of grinding quinoa as a flour to be mixed with Nsima is very strong and frequent. I have received so many comments about that. And I think that's a really important step in the next process, which is happening, which is really exciting. So right now, the nutrition department is working on new recipes, new ways of including quinoa. And in my recommendations or conclusions in my thesis, I mentioned that more food trials would be interesting, especially when mixing quinoa flour in with the maize and Nsima to see what the taste preferences are. It'd be interesting to do a side-by-side comparison of maize versus quinoa preparation, and that could include storage also. Field days with quinoa and women in nutrition groups, and program implementation of the outreach programs with Bunda and extension planning areas and villagers. And so that was my research. Any questions?